All right, good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. Let's just do a brief test, make sure at least some of you can hear me out there. If you can hear me, raise your hand in the app. All right, looks like we got some hands raised, so hopefully the audio is working okay. Today we're going to be talking about Nebula, our cloud-managed network system. So before we start getting into it, just a little housekeeping. As we go through here today, if you have any questions, send them in via the Q&A button window panel, however it looks on whichever device you're using it for. That is how I will see your questions, and I will try to answer them as we go through. If you have any other comments or there's audio problems or anything like that, send them in via Q&A as well. There's so many little windows and boxes that take up my screen here, so Q&A is what I'm going to be able to see as we go through. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and get started. So Nebula, give it a second here. I'm recording this, so my computer bogs down every time I do that. Wait, maybe it'll advance to the next slide. There we go. So Nebula is our cloud-managed networking solution. It's free. Provides zero-touch plug-and-play installation of switches, access points, and security gateways. There's no controller hardware that needs to be installed, no software, no cloud keys, nothing like that. And we'll start getting through a little bit about why and what this is. If you're familiar with Meraki, it's very similar to a Meraki-type solution. So the first thing we're going to look at here is just setting up your typical network. So areas here are puzzle pieces that are in gray, or where going to the cloud saves you either time, money, or both. So it dramatically saves you time as far as the installation goes. Hardware just needs access to an internet connection and power. There's no local configuration in general that needs to be done. And because of how easy the installation is, you don't have to send someone on site who's very technical and knows how to configure the devices. You know, your cable runner can just plug them in and set them up for you. Monitoring is done through the cloud itself automatically. So there's no additional monitoring equipment or software you need to get. Remote access is done through the cloud. There's no needing to set up VPNs to get remote access, port forwarding, punching holes in the firewall, anything like that. We use standard HTTP traffic to reach out to the cloud, HTTPS, to reach out to the cloud for communications and management. The cloud itself also acts as your monitoring platform. I will say there, though, that if you've already got something that you like, something like Zabbix or SolarWinds, that also could still be used with Nebula products. They still fully support SNMP. Logs are automatically stored in the cloud for you, and if you're using our cloud database to do user authentication, that's all stored in the cloud. There's no local storage required. And then we simplify updates and setting changes. It's all done just through the same pane of glass through a web interface. Firmware updates are pushed out, can be pushed out automatically at a certain time that you specify. You can schedule different times for different sites and for different types of hardware. So that's where we save you time and money by moving up into the cloud. So we'll start going a little bit more in depth into some of these things. So one of the nice things here with Nebula is you can do the setup without having to unbox anything. You can go ahead, log into Nebula, create your customer site, and start doing the configuration before you even order the hardware. Once you've got the hardware sent to you, adding the devices to your customer site is as simple as scanning the QR code. You can find those QR codes both on the belly label of the product itself. It can also be found on the outside of the box. So you can get the hardware, scan them, add them to your customer, and then forward them on to your customer location. You don't have to take them out of the box, plug them in, do anything like that. So setting up Nebula really legitimately takes just a few minutes. Probably the longest part of the process is setting up your My Zyxel account if you don't have one already. If you do, all you need to do is go to nebula.zyxel.com, log in with that username and password, create the customer, and from there do your configurations. We'll automatically default to some basic stock configuration. We've got some wizards to help you do customization, And if you're using our Nebula Pro Pack, you can clone existing customers and sites, and then just need to change the few things that might be different than the standard configuration. Mike's got a question here. I'll go ahead and answer it. Nebula can be premise-based. How much? So Nebula is a cloud-based service. It's hosted entirely in the cloud by us. So there is nothing that's being installed on premise. There is not a virtualized version of the software that you can install yourself. Nebula is running in our cloud at all times. Hope that was the question you were asking. We'll go ahead and keep going on here. So again, there's no additional hardware or software that's required. It's entirely cloud-based. So you just plug in the equipment, and it will automatically reach out to the cloud for us. So again, no servers that need to have software installed on them, no virtual machines, no cloud keys, no network controllers, nothing like that. So once you've got everything plugged in, you have access to it anywhere you have internet access and a web browser. So most of the configuration and monitoring will be done through a web browser. We do have an app. The app is primarily designed for installers, but it also lets you get a quick snapshot idea of what's going on at your different customer accounts and their sites. It also does at the moment provide some basic Wi-Fi configuration. So if you have someone come in, they need to set up a new SSID or change the security key, you can do that from your phone real easily. So in addition to the normal functionality, we have built-in captive portal functionality. It's built in both to the gateway product, and it is built in on the access points. So if you have a gateway, you can provide captive portal across all devices, wired or wireless. If you're not using a Nebula gateway, you can still use the built-in captive portal on the access points for wireless guest access. The captive portal is completely customizable by you. We have sort of a what you see is what you get editor that you can use to modify the default captive portal page. You can also download the captive portal page as HTML and CSS files and then modify them to your heart's content and then re-upload them to the Nebula cloud. Or if you're looking for some functionality that we don't offer built into Nebula, you can redirect to an externally hosted captive portal page that integrates in with Nebula. So you can use the default Nebula functions plus add your own functions to be, such as capturing additional guest information before granting them access. We also have guest protection, so we can make it so guest users are unable to send data to each other, so you don't have to worry about one guest hacking another guest, or if someone forgets to unshare a folder, something like that. In addition, if you don't have VLAN functionality, our guest captive portal also has the ability to isolate those wireless guest users from your internal corporate network without needing to use VLANs. It uses something we call layer 2 isolation, which will prevent guests from being able to directly send data to any other device on the corporate network. Use specifically whitelist devices such as your internet connection to grant them access to them or to a shared printer or a NAS storage folder that guests might want to use. We have a question here from Paul. Paul is asking, what platforms does the app run on? The Nebula app is Android and iOS. So the two by far largest supported operating systems out there for phones and tablets. So when it comes to wireless, we've got some advanced functionality in there that you might like. Smart mesh functionality. So with smart mesh, you plug in which access points have access to Ethernet. Those that don't have access, you just hook them up and give them power. They will automatically find and connect to those access points that do have the wired connection, creating a smart mesh that requires no configuration on your part to set up. We support all the major types of encryption and security, including the ability not only to use a Radius server for doing user authentication with WPA2 Enterprise, but you can also use our cloud database to do that authentication. And then we support a lot of the newer industry standards for things like fast roaming and load balancing. So that's 802.11r, K, V, etc. On the switch side of things, we have intelligent PoE, so we intelligently monitor the PoE devices, see what amounts of power those devices use, not just as an average, but also what they need to boot up. And then we free up any additional PoE power budgets, so you can be able to hook up a lot more devices than you traditionally would be able to with that same level of power budget. We make it really easy to set up access control lists, VLAN configuration, 802.1x authentication, et cetera, et cetera. And the switches can be virtually stacked, allowing you to simultaneously change the configuration of multiple ports across multiple switches all at one time. So updates are done over the air. The Nebula Cloud portion, that's updated once a week. So that's a seamless thing that's done in the cloud itself. When it comes to firmware updates, those you'll get an email letting you know there's going to be a new firmware coming out. We have a certain default time, which I think is Sunday at 2 a.m. that firmware updates are pushed out. But you can go in there and change the date and time those are done. You can choose to delay it indefinitely, or you can set up those rules based on a per device type. So you can update your access points at a different time than you want to push out the updates for the switches, et cetera. If you're making configuration changes, those will automatically be downloaded to the devices. Generally, the lag between when you save something in the Nebula Cloud and when it gets applied to the device itself is 1 to 4 minutes. That's pretty average. Two is what minimum of 2 is what we shoot for. Every now and then it takes a little bit longer than that. So when it comes to our security gateways, we make it super simple to set up site-to-site VPNs. It's really a matter of just going into the GUI, saying, hey, I want to create a VPN, choose the devices that you want to VPN together, and then choose the topology, star or hub and spoke, hit apply, and we'll take care of everything else on the back end that needs to be done to make those VPN connections work. So whether you're an MSP or just a traditional VAR, it makes it super easy for you to keep an eye on and manage all of your accounts. Nebula is set up under an org and site basis. So each one of your customers, you would set up as an organization in Nebula terminology. And then under that organization, you can have an unlimited number of sites. So we'll show you here a little screenshot showing you when you log in, this is what you see. You get a breakdown of all of your customers as an org, and then you can see whether they're using the free version of Nebula or whether they've upgraded to one of the Nebula add-ons that requires a license. But the status of those licenses are, if they haven't expired, when they're going to be expiring and need a renewal, how many sites each customer has, and a brief rundown of how many devices are online. After you choose a site, there we go. After you choose a customer org, you get the site view here, which shows you all of the sites that that customer has. And again, you get sort of a snapshot of what's going on the network. It also includes Google Maps built in, so you can have the different sites visually represented as to where they are in the world. And then once you drill down into a site, you get taken to this dashboard here. There's 2 versions of the dashboard. If you're just using Nebula for wireless management, we've got a dedicated wireless view. And if you're using Nebula to manage switches in the gateway as well, then we've got this total view here that you see on the screen right now. So it gives you a quick brief view of all the devices that are currently online versus how many are registered to that site, how many wireless clients are currently online, PoE consumption versus budget, WAN stats, and then over on the right with our gateway here, we can actually break down bandwidth utilization on an application basis. So we can let you know, is it YouTube, is it Netflix, is it peer-to-peer, is it web browsing, is it FTP, and then we can also show you which client devices are the ones using all that bandwidth up. So just to reiterate here, the Nebula management platform itself is free. So you do not have to buy any licenses to use our cloud management platform. And a little bit later in the presentation, I'll go through a little bit more in depth of what's included with the free Nebula there. So this is just showing here Nebula hardware-wise. We offer security gateways, switches, and access points. We get asked a lot if we have IP cameras, and the answer is no. We don't have IP cameras as part of Nebula at the moment. So, in addition to dedicated Nebula hardware, we also have something called Nebula Flex, which is what we're gradually moving over to for all the product lines, except for possibly the gateways. Oh, I think even that's eventually going to happen. So Nebula Flex, if you see a product marketed as Nebula Flex, that tells you the hardware can be used either as a standalone device or it can be managed with Nebula, either or. If you see something labeled Nebula Flex Pro, and at the moment this is just our access points, it tells you the device can be used standalone. It can be used with a traditional wireless controller, whether it's our standalone NXC series or the built-in wireless controller on our USG, ATP, and UAG security gateways. Or it can be managed in the cloud. And if you choose to manage it in the cloud with Nebula, it includes 1 year of ProPack automatically will get applied when you first register it to an organization. And again, I'll talk a little bit more later about the differences between free Nebula, ProPack, etc. So this is just showing here, if you want to take a device that you've bought that's Nebula Flex, you want to manage it in the cloud, it's really simple. You log into nebula.zyxel.com and you register the device. There's still some old units floating around out there that don't have the Nebula compatible firmware automatically loaded on them. So if you get one of those, you will have to manually update the firmware to one of the Nebula compatible versions. But most devices already have the minimum Nebula support on the firmware on them, and they'll automatically download the latest firmware themselves. So once you register that device, whether you're scanning in the QR code or manually typing in the serial number and MAC address, the device will automatically reboot into Nebula mode. If at some point you decide, you know what, I don't want to use Nebula for this device, maybe you're moving it to a different customer who doesn't need or want Nebula, or maybe you just decided Nebula is not for you, removing it and switching it back to the other mode is really simple. Log into Nebula, unregister your device from both the site and the organization, and the device itself will recognize that it's been unregistered and will automatically boot back into standalone mode for you. So now we'll talk a little bit about the add-on licenses. So the first thing we'll talk about here is Professional Pack. So Professional Pack unlocks a number of cloud features that aren't included in the free version of Nebula. So some of the key points on here is we give you we can set up status alert emails to alert you if a device goes offline based on parameters that you set. It can email you or give you a push notification through the app. It expands the built-in logs from a week worth of log information to a full year's worth of log information. It allows you to set up custom reports that can automatically be emailed either to yourself or emailed to your customer. And most of those allow you to add your own logo to them so your customer knows it's coming from you. It gives you what we call user audit. So that tracks every configuration change made in Nebula and whose account made that change. So if you've got a lot of different techs that might be editing things, you can go in and say, oh, this was Bob. Bob made that change. I better go talk to him and find out why he did it, et cetera, et cetera. And some other cool things on there, like automatically drawing out your network topology and stuff like that. Some of the other cooler things we do here is on the switches. We give you really granular control on a port basis of uplink and downlink speeds. So that's something we see a lot used in hospitality to make sure users if you've got a hardware connection, those users aren't exceeding all bandwidth or allowing you to dedicate bandwidth to IPTV devices, et cetera. So we've generated and added a built-in report. So if you're doing IPTV, again, this is primarily probably a hospitality feature. We've got a built-in report. We've got additional functionality to let you modify the multicast settings, and then we've got a report that monitors what's going on with those multicast settings and will automatically tell you which guests are watching what channel, which channels they're watching the most of, as well as letting you know, hey, there's been some errors here. We've seen some packet drops. We've seen some other things which might be degrading the IPTV performance, and we give you some suggestions on what changes you need to make in order to solve those issues. That's just showing you here one of the screens to show you what it looks like. Let's get that. So we've now got something new that just came out. It's the Wireless Health Report. It's supported by the NWA 1123 ACHD, the 5123 ACHD, and the WAC 6303D-S. And any new access points we launch from this point forward will support this wireless health functionality. Basically, it generates a report for you that lets you know what's going on your network, which users or access points are having communication errors, so you can see, and you can quickly, based on just looking at it, be able to view the quality of connection that each of your users is getting. So really nice for hospitality to deal with guests complaining about poor performance, really good in business situations where you've got corners or new deployments where you might have corners or things that aren't getting proper coverage, or may have something else going on that are causing issues. So that's available now. If you want to learn more about that, next week, I think it is next Thursday, I will be doing a webinar where we break down and go into a little bit more in depth on all the new features that were added to Nebula at the end of June, beginning of July. So again, with ProPack here, we have the ability to create configuration templates. So these are specific settings in an org that maybe you want to push out across the site. So instead of having to go into each site and manually make those changes, you can make them once on the template and then push that template to all the other sites. And you can choose which sites it will be applied to and which ones it will ignore. We have the ability to clone settings from one switch over to another switch, and the ability to clone, back up, and restore individual orgs and sites to speed up your configuration process when you're creating a new site. So something else we've just added here with the ProPack is Facebook Wi-Fi. So Facebook Wi-Fi is where a guest, instead of going to the built-in captive portal, is redirected to Facebook's own captive portal, which basically prompts the user to check in or like your business. So you get some free advertising before granting them free internet access. This is a little bit different than Facebook authentication, which is offered in the free version of Nebula. And again, we'll be going into a little bit more details on this in my webinar next week on the new features. So that's it for ProPack. The other type of license we offer is our security license pack. So basically, this is for our gateways. This is independent of the ProPack license, and this adds antivirus, content filtering, application-based firewall rules, application-based QoS, application-based reports, IDP, and our Nebula security reports. So this is just showing you here one of the security gateway reports, the analysis that we provide, letting you take a look at what applications are using bandwidth, what sort of, let's see, I think there's one more report here. So that was one just showing you how bandwidth is being utilized. And I think for some reason it's showing me the same report twice. Let's go to the next slide. There we go. Antivirus report showing you what's been blocked, the type of things, which devices we're trying to access or have the antivirus hit on them, etc. So just a quick summary here. So Nebula free version of Nebula, zero-touch deployment using our cloud, automatic updates for the devices, weeks worth of logs stored in the cloud, an unlimited number of customer accounts, sites, and devices that can be managed through the cloud. So you're not going to get to 5 or 10 devices and have to start paying. It's unlimited across the board. As you upgrade, if you decide to upgrade to the professional pack, we've just gone through a lot of the main features that the professional pack adds. One thing to note here is the professional pack is available either as an annual license or as a lifetime perpetual license. So if you know you're going to be using this continuing on by the lifetime license, it is locked to the organization, not the device. So if you decide, next year to upgrade to Wi-Fi 6 access points, you won't have to buy new licenses. You just take down the old devices, put in the new devices. And so that'll keep going in theory for perpetuality here. Let's see here. So yeah, those are some of the differences. Then there's a security pack. And just to make this clear, if for some reason you upgrade to professional pack and then the license expires, you do not get locked out of your product like you do with Meraki. It simply falls back to the free version until you decide at some future point if you want to upgrade to the Pro Pack again. So this is just showing here security gateways that support Nebula are our NSG series. We've currently got 4 different models with different performance. All of them include out of the box 1 year of the Pro Pack license, 1 year of the security licenses. So when you add this to your organization, these licenses will automatically get applied. So I just want to point this out here. If you're taking the device, plugging it into one org, then you decide to move it to another org, the license, that's easy to do, but the license stays with the original org that the device was first activated with. If you need to move those licenses over to a new org, you need to open a ticket or contact support, and it takes a few days to do. Originally, we weren't supposed to transfer licenses at all, but we're doing that now. But just keep that in mind, because we run into this a lot where our customers will take the device, associate them with an org to test them and play with them, and then they'll move them to a different org for their customer, and then wonder why they don't have the Pro Pack features anymore. And that's because the licenses are still stuck to that first organization the device was activated on. So switches that support Nebula, we've got our dedicated NSW series. And then we've also got our 1920 V2 series and our 1930 series. So any 1920 V2 or any 1930 is Nebula Flex and can automatically switch over to Nebula. The dedicated NSW switches include 1 year of Pro Pack. That Nebula Flex products do not include any Pro Pack. So they'll automatically go in as Nebula free, and then you'll need to buy a Pro Pack license if you want those Pro Pack features. And then wireless access points, this is where it gets a little bit more confusing. Nebula access points are what was Nebula to begin with, and it's a little bit more funky. So the NAP series access points, those are dedicated Nebula only access points. Those include 3 years of the Pro Pack when you first activate them. They also qualify for our discounted lifetime license instead of the full price license. To use this top-up or upgrade license, whatever we want to call it, the discounted lifetime license, you do still have to have a device that included Pro Pack out of the box, and that license still has to be valid. So if you take that device, move it to another organization, you will not be able to use the top-up license. If you've had the license, it was one of the products that comes with 1 year, and that 1 year has expired, the top-up license will not work. The regular license will work though. So this is just also showing here, certain devices support controllers as well as Nebula. Only certain devices support the smart mesh functionality. Eventually, all of the access points should support smart mesh, but right now it's just these few here. And then the Wi-Fi health report is just those 3 access points we talked about earlier. So it's not advancing my slide. Give me a second. Click unfreeze. There we go. So at this point, pretty much every one of our access points on the market supports Nebula Flex in some form. The only exception to that is the NWA 5123 AC, the older version. It does not have enough memory to support the Nebula firmware, but everything else now pretty much supports Nebula. So the WAC 6303DS and the NWA 5123 AC HD, those include 1 year of the Pro Pack, and for this year and this year only, 2019, if you activate them before the end of the year, we'll give you an extra 2 years for 3 years total of the Pro Pack out of the box. And then all of our other Nebula Flex Pro products have 1 year out of the box. Moving forward here. So if you want to try this out, you can go to nebula.zyxel.com at any time. We have a free demo site set up there. So you can log in, check it out, play with it, do whatever you want on it. So that's always available for you. If you'd like to get some hardware to actually play with in person, as long as you're part of a partner program, you can reach out to your sales rep and you can ask them for a demo kit, and we'll send you some hardware that you can use yourself and play with in your own lab. I think it's a 60-day demo, and then you either buy it at the NFR price or you can send it back to us. But it gives you a good chance to get in there and see what's going on, play with it yourself, make sure it's going to work. So at this point, I'm going to open it up for Q&A. So if there's any questions, this is a much more streamlined version of the presentation than I normally give. Feel free to type those questions in using the Q&A box. My email is up there as well, so feel free to email me with any Nebula questions going forward. And if you have any feedback on today's presentation, let me know. Also, if you have any ideas for webinar topics that you'd like to see, whether there be tech talks, whether they be in-depth things, whether they be certain features and stuff, let us know. We're always looking for your feedback as to what sort of additional webinars and training that we can provide for you that would interest you. So by letting us know what you're looking for, that helps us determine what to put together and present to people. Okay, on to questions. Just a question asking where to get a copy of the slides. This webinar is being recorded. So the recording of this will be posted up and should be accessible through our website, including the partner portal. If you need actual slides, we can probably provide you a PDF version. Just ask your salesperson for that and they can email it to you. So anonymous attendee is asking, can a site be reassigned to a different organization? So to answer that question, there's no easy way to do it. I believe that if you open a ticket with HQ, if you have the ProPack, if you don't have the ProPack, if you reach out and call our tech support locally here in Anaheim, I believe we can put in a ticket to transfer a site from one org to another. I don't think I've seen anyone ever ask for that before. I know for sure we can change ownership of organizations. I know we can change licenses from one org to another by opening a ticket. I would assume you can do that, but I'm not sure I've ever actually seen anybody ask for that to happen. Generally, it's an org transfer from one org to another rather than sites. But like I said, I think it can be done. I just haven't seen it done. And then the next question was, will the wireless health report be added to other APs with firmware updates? And the answer for that at the moment is no. It's just those three models we had listed on there. There's a slight chance it'll come to the NWA 1302 in the future. And then every other new access point. And we've got a bunch of new access points that will be coming out either end of this year or early next year. Those will all support the Wi-Fi health report. It requires some functionality on the chipset that just isn't supported with the older access points. So that is all I've got for questions. Again, if you have any more, I'll stick around for a few more minutes. Just use the Q&A window. But for everyone else, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you giving us the time. And again, I welcome any feedback you can give us, any suggestions you want to give us as far as other webinar topics. And even if you've used Nebula and you've got some issues or had some concerns or have some feature requests or some suggestions to make it better, let me know. I am the product manager for Nebula, so just email me and give me your feedback. I can't promise you we will implement those, but you know, it's that feedback that helps dedicate, you know, where our focus is as far as new feature enhancements. In addition, if you're already using Nebula, I believe there is a little link in small text at the bottom of any page you're on where you can directly click that and send us feedback and feature requests, which goes directly to R&D. Okay, I'm not getting any additional questions. I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. Thanks, everybody.